I started using Firebase right at the beginning of my development journey, and now much further along the path, but I'm still using it. That's because it works well. So this isn't a discussion of whether or not Firebase is a good tool, because it is. I know some people are completely anti-Firebase though, and that's okay. But I'm personally more concerned with whether or not the tool can efficiently perform the task at hand. And for most problems, Firebase serves the needs fairly well, from authentication to cloud storage to hosting to analytics and much, much more. Firebase has got you, but nothing is without its faults. The reason I took a liking to Firebase when I started is because it basically does everything for you. Funnily enough, though, this is the reason why I'm giving it a break. Well, this and some of its quirks, which I'll get to. With Firebase, you don't really need a server because its SDK runs on the client. Of course, you could set up cloud functions for any backend work, but for the most part, that's it. Initially, I thought, gee, that's great. That means I get to spend most of my time client side working on the app itself. And like, yeah, there's truth in that statement, but you really should be striving to ship as little JavaScript as possible to the client. And if you're uncareful, Firebase kind of feeds into what, for lack of a better word, I'll refer to as front end mind virus, where you over optimize for problems that already have a traditional solution involving some back end technologies. And on top of this, if you're starting out of Firebase, it can be very enticing to just use it for all your projects because it's so easy and versatile, which robs you of much needed and necessary exposure to plenty of tools like SQL, for example. I vehemently avoided it for the longest time because well, it's kind of annoying to write. And like, yeah, I could use an ORM like Prisma, but even then I was like, I might as well just use a document database because it's much easier to set up. I struggled to reconcile that these were thoughts going through my head. I was high on that NoSQL supply. It's strange that I still settled on Firebase though, because it doesn't even have the best document database out there. The best one, in my opinion, is MongoDB, because Firestore, which is Firebase's document database offering, is quirky. Let me explain. Not too long ago, I could not do something like this. Before, you were limited to only one comparison operator per query. So you couldn't do something like, where review count is less than 10 and average rating is less than 3. You couldn't do both. You had to do one and then locally check the other one using some, validation or batch querying. It was annoying and made no sense. Luckily, that's something they fixed. Aggregations aren't that great either, and you can't perform full text search on your fields and have to resort to ad hoc ways of querying text or resorting to a third-party service like Elasticsearch. Besides Firestore, the other products are pretty good, in particular authentication. This one just might be my favorite. Look how easy it is to set up. You come to the Auth console. Google is enabled by default, but if you wanted to add another one, you just come to add new provider, say you want to do Microsoft, click enable, and enter the ID and secret. Obviously, you get these from Microsoft. It literally doesn't get any easier than that. And the code as well is pretty self-explanatory. Create your Google Auth provider, sign in with pop-up providing the auth and provider, and that's it. Earlier this year, I made a progressive web app and needed a way to send push notifications. Implementing this from scratch would have been a horrendous endeavor, but the notification service from Firebase was just the tool I needed. And this right here is where Firebase shines. For most broad problems you have, Firebase probably has an offering that caters to your needs. And the community is great. From the documentation to the YouTube channel, articles, blogs, tutorials, it's nice. Overall, though, I think having a modular code base is something to strive for. It encourages experimentation and curiosity, while Firebase kind of nudges you into using its Swiss Army knife kit of tools. This isn't a reason to hate or love it. It's simply a tool. Sometimes what you need is a Swiss Army knife kit, because it's quick, convenient, and easy to use, while other times a more specialized tool might be a better fit for the job. It's not necessarily a matter of preference, but more a question of what tool can I use that will best solve the task at hand. Notice how I didn't mention anything about vendor lock-in. That's because to me, this argument kind of feels like a non-problem. Netflix is basically built on AWS, and they're doing just fine. If worrying about vendor lock-in ever becomes a real problem, then I'd imagine the team of engineers you now have are more than capable of sorting that out as you take a trip in your private jet over to Belize.